Good evening, everyone. My name's Len Green. I'm a Palatine resident. I won't be 5 minutes, I promise you. It's just a quick observation, I guess. I note in the documentation that relative to the budget, you're going to hold a public hearing, and I think it's going to be on September 17th. So I'm really just addressing the board on this topic right now. I think it's a good idea to have that public hearing. I know it's held regularly. What I'd like to do this time is ask the board if we, the people, can get clarity that the hearing will be interactive. It seems to me that if we're going to have a public hearing on an important budget discussion, that it would really be productive to, I think, provide a forum whereby some questions can be asked, some answers can be provided. And I also fully realize, being a finance guy that's prepared budgets myself in the past, that some questions may require a bit of research, and it's not quite possible to give a complete answer at that particular stage. But at the same time, there are often a number of questions that can be answered in terms of simple things like saying, what's the background behind a major increase in a major expense item? I would expect people would be knowledgeable of that, and the administration, I'm sure, would be able to provide that if they built the budget up in the right way. So, long story short, really in the interest of accountability and collaboration, I would really request that the board consider providing that kind of interactive mechanism for that public hearing. I think it will encourage people. I think it will increase participation from the community, which is, I know, always a tough thing. If I look around the room right now, how many people are actually not affiliated with a school or school district? It's pretty poor, and I think we need to get more on that. So really, that's what I wanted to mention. Finally, if you do consider that the current board policy regarding citizens address the board, etc., will prohibit the process from being interactive, I'm sure you can find a way to modify it or lift it for the purpose of this public hearing. If you do need to get hold of me, my mobile number, which is good from 7 in the morning till 9 at night, is 847-778-4881. Be happy to discuss it further. Thanks.
Thank you very much for coming. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board?
You go ahead.
Mr. Parker, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Do you mind if I write it down?
Yes, Zelenka.
Zelenka?
Yeah.
That's right, I said Zelenka. You'll be next.
This will take less than 5 minutes. As the tentative budget comes up to be addressed, I know the board members are looking at all the articles that are in it, and it's quite lengthy. My concern is now, and has always been, the people in the community. Just got an email today, my friend Wayne did, from Michelle Mussman, saying her biggest complaint is still property taxes, of which the school district generates a large part of. I see we have Fred Crespo in the audience. He might be able to tell you what his biggest complaint is from his constituents. In talking to Tom Morrison on Sunday, it was the same thing. What I'm interested in is doing our best to set a precedent and show some leadership to the rest of the school districts around here that have similar concerns and would piggyback off our leadership if we were to actually cut our budget. I don't mean decrease the rate of increase, but actually cut our budget, and there's a lot of things in it that could be addressed. I know that we have a good superintendent, and his job is operations. The school board's job is to set school board policy or tax levy policy in this case. And I'm looking forward to the newly elected board members doing that job more serious than the board members that are now gone, that I've seen have neglected that responsibility in the past. So thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Months prior to the actual budget adoption. Several key considerations of the budget will be reviewed with you this evening, highlighting all of these pieces of the budget puzzle. First, development of the budget has occurred with consideration of several key economic factors, which have had a direct impact on our revenue sources for the new fiscal year. A low rate of CPI combined with the uncertainty of our state's disbursement schedule for categorical aid in the coming year have have put a limit on our available revenue sources. And despite these challenging economic times, the budget continues to provide balance of revenues over expenditures for all of our major operating funds, which allows us to remain in compliance with the Illinois School Code. The budget includes a transfer of an additional $2 million to fund our debt service levy reduction, bringing our total reduction since 2008 to a total of over $28 million. And the district continues its progression towards its educational goals and has included resources for the continuation and sustainability of our educational program within the district. And finally, we continue with several capital projects, including the renovation of our district pools, our media centers into learning commons, our Higgins Education Center, and athletic fields, which are all scheduled to continue throughout the coming year. For this year's budget, the following parameters have served as the basis for our budget development. The budget plan's ending position has a modest surplus in its combined operating funds of just over $400,000. Overall, for the combined total funds, the district has a planned deficit of $24.7 million, which is directly the result of utilization of our fund balance reserves. Of this, $18 million is scheduled to continue our capital improvement expenditures for the coming year. And again, as I mentioned, $2 million will be used for our debt service levy reduction payment. The district will also be able to utilize the remaining proceeds from the phase 1 of our life safety bonds, from our 2012-13 life safety bonds, for the completion of our HVAC replacement that is currently just about to wrap up over at Conant High School. And in planning for all of these initiatives, the district has ensured that we are able to remain in compliance and have a minimum of 33.33% of the following year's expenditures in all of our operating funds. When we look at our revenue, local property taxes remain our largest source of revenue for the district, making up over 86%. When our property taxes are budgeted to include the second installment of the 2014 levy and the first installment of the 2015 levy. And because we do not know what our 2015 levy will be, it has not been determined at this point. Cook County, they issue the first installment of the property taxes for 2015 based upon 55% of the 2014 levy. Other local sources for the district include our food service interest, our student fees, personal property replacement taxes, and tuition. And total local revenue makes up over 91% of the district's revenue. State sources for the district make up about 6% of our revenue and include both general state aid and categorical aid payments. And federal aid makes up about 2.5% of our revenue, and we receive that for reimbursements for things such as our special education programs, our title programs, and food service program. Overall, our budgeted operating fund revenue is expected to increase by approximately 0.4% for fiscal year 16. While local property taxes were levied at an increase of 1.7% for the 2014 levy, we do not receive 100% of that collection. In fact, we budget on an annual basis and continue to monitor our property tax refunds. We are still trending at approximately about a 2.5% loss, which equates about $5 million annually that's lost to property taxes out of our current year's collections from prior tax years. The state has approved the education portion of the budget and has actually had a slight increase in our general state aid allocation for the year. While the foundation level has remained constant at a level of $6,119, what we are seeing the change in is the change in the proration amount. So if you'll recall last year, towards the end of the year, there was actually a greater proration that took us to about 87% of our total allocation, and this year it has been increased to 92%. So we do expect to see an increase in that category. With regard to our categorical aids, the reimbursement levels have been set as flat. And we have budgeted for those to receive approximately three payments in each of the various areas. We have received our first payment actually, which was a payment that was paid in arrears from fiscal year 15, and are expecting 2 out of the 4 that are due to us for fiscal year 16. For the coming year, we've had no changes in our instructional fees for students. Those have remained flat. We do expect a slight decrease in the collection of these fees as we are seeing a decline in enrollment. First of all, we expect to see some changes in our free and reduced population, and also have some changes in some rental fees and things like that as our facilities continue to be updated. And finally, we have no additional capital transfers that are scheduled for fiscal year 16. We will continue to utilize the remaining funds that were transferred last year, which were not paid out due to the timing of invoices towards the end of the fiscal year.
With over 2,000 employees on staff, the district's largest asset is also the district's largest expense. Salaries and benefits combined account for approximately 3/4 of our annual expenses. Each spring, we work together with Human Resources to determine the anticipated percentage increases in salaries for each of our major job classes. Collective bargaining agreements are the starting point for building many of the models which formulate these percentages. Also taken into account are the Consumer Price Index, staff retirement, class enrollments, student population dynamics, anticipated grant revenue, as well as other factors before we settle in on these fluctuation percentages. Just to touch briefly on a couple areas, we're projecting teacher salaries, our largest job class, to increase by 1.1% next year. As you are aware, our enrollment for next year is projected to be down 2%. Due to the dynamics of this reduction by grade level and by building, this translated into a teacher headcount reduction of 8 full-time teachers. Salaries for teaching assistants are projected to decrease by 0.8% next year. This is due to a conscious effort to restructure support staff in the special education area, reducing our staff by 10 employees for next year. This year, capital outlay will account for another 11% of our total expenditure budget, with all other categories individually falling below 5% of the total. The Capital Project Fund accounts for major capital improvements across the district. For 2016, costs will include renovations at all 5 swimming pools, media center renovations at 4 schools, completion of work at the Higgins Education Center for special and alternative education programs, and improvements to playing fields at multiple schools. Many of these projects will take place over multiple years, and the associated costs will span several budget years. All of this work will be funded through existing reserves transferred in prior fiscal years. Also budgeted in capital outlay, but in other funds, includes $1.5 million for the purchase of the Higgins Education Center and $1.1 million for new school buses. I'm pleased to report that we have paid off our 2006 working cash debt and only have phase 1 of the life safety bonds outstanding in the amount of $11.4 million. Next year, we'll make a payment on these bonds of approximately $5 million as reflected in our budget. Although the maximum allowable levy in the debt service fund would be equal to this $5 million payment, the board has chosen to reduce the debt service levy to taxpayers through its debt abatement strategy. In this budget year, we will reduce our debt service levy by $2 million through abatement, bringing the total levy reduction to taxpayers over the last 8 years to $28 million. Also budgeted for in the debt service fund is the iPad financing through capital lease. We currently have 3 capital leases outstanding for our over 14,500 iPads. The education fund will fund the required payments of $2.5 million. In total, our working budget is showing an increase in our expenditures of just over $7 million, or 2.8% over the prior year. Over half of this increase relates to our largest expense categories of salaries and benefits. Again, the district will utilize $2 million in reserves to make its debt service payment this year, reducing the levy to the taxpayers by this amount. We will complete $18 million in the capital projects using money from reserves. Since this money has been transferred in prior fiscal years, we are not planning any additional transfers for capital in this coming year. Phase 1 of life safety will conclude this summer with work at Conant, exhausting phase 1 of our bond proceeds. Funding options for phase 2 of our life safety work in the amount of $10 million will be presented to the board later this year. The district is presenting a balanced budget in its operating funds as required by the State Board of Education. The beginning of the year fund balance is 54%. For all fund combined, the budget shows spending in excess of revenues of almost $25 million. This is due to planned spending on capital, continuation of the district's debt abatement strategy, and the financing of the iPad leases. Looking ahead, the financial projection shows evidence of the growing challenge to align expenditures with revenues in the given current year assumptions. With minimal increases in state and federal funding projected, the dependence upon local property taxes continues to be a growing challenge for our district, as 86% of our revenue comes from property taxes. All levy projections provide for the allowable increase to sustain the district's operating funds necessary to maintain the existing instructional programs in accordance with tax cap limitations. However, growth is projected to be minimal. Overall program needs, staffing levels, and collective bargaining agreements will be vital areas to monitor and address in ensuing years in relation to the district's financial projections.
Tonight, as we've presented you with the tentative budget recommendation for approval, our following steps would be that we would place the tentative budget on public display for a minimum of 30 days. We would come back then at our September Board of Education meeting and hold a public hearing and present final information to you on the tentative budget, and would recommend adoption at that time. The final budget does need